Okay, we're doing more from the book here, Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're doing John Holt. He's a great educator. He wrote a bunch of books about homeschooling. He was educated as an engineer, but he ended up being like a grade school teacher, and then he ended up mostly being a writer and going around giving lectures. He's a bright guy. He said, we ask children to do for most of the day what few adults are able to do for even 1 hour. How many of us would be willing to sit for an hour watching a lecture that doesn't interest at all, and our minds keep wandering from some stranger who we're not interested in listening to? School is a ridiculous thing. We're so used to it, we think it's normal, but it's bad. It really is. Hardly any of us. I'd go insane if I had to listen to some lady, yapping for 8 hours a day. I used to get in lots of trouble in school. I think it's because I was smart. I would do the homework in 5 minutes and then want to throw a paper airplane and make my friends laugh. I spent 2 years in school suspension, 3rd grade, 4th grade. I was suspended many other times. I was always bored. I was bored out of my mind staring out the window. I hated school. I liked sports. I finally was good in school because my mother told me, you stop goofing around in school or otherwise no rides to wrestling practice. Okay, John Holt lived from 1923 to 1985. He was a bright guy. He could read a book in a day. He was sort of a big proponent of homeschooling. Now, here's some of his quotes. I think that our society expects schools to get students to the point where they will only do things for rewards. People who perform a task for internal reasons are hard to control. Yeah, like Christians. Okay? Now, I don't think teachers get up in the morning and say to themselves, I'm going to go to school today and take away all of these young people's internal motivations, but they do. The public school system is based on the Prussian German school system to produce factory workers and obedient, stupid people, okay? It's designed to make people stupid, conformist. It's why all the kids are the same age, for example. Okay, John Holt continues. He says, the socializing aspect of school are 10 times as bad and likely to be harmful as helpful. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, you got to go to school, you learn social skills. You learn bad social skills in a public school, okay? I've seen what happens in public schools. Kids are having sex by 6th grade. There's kids getting pregnant. There's kids getting fighting. There's kids getting beaten up for lunch money. All the kids hang around in their own little cliques. They don't know anything. They intentionally put all the kids together the same age so they're unable to help each other. Ayn Rand wrote a great essay about this called Compra Chicos, okay, about how it's deliberately done to make children stupid. You learn from being around people who are older than you and who know more than you do, okay? You also learn from being around people who care about you. Your parents want you to be learned. Your older brothers and sisters want to help you. Okay, some random stranger lady. The lady teachers, they mean well, but they just don't know much, okay? And they're programmed to teach meaningless, worthless stuff. It's obvious. The most valuable thing you could learn in school would be study skills. But there is no school that teaches study skills. I've never in my life, after asking hundreds of people, met a single person that learned study skills in grade school or high school. Not one. That'd be the most valuable thing you could teach. They always teach stuff in a stupid way. They teach Spanish language based on grammar. No one ever learns language. I know people who majored in Spanish in college, they still can't speak Spanish. No one learns a language by studying grammar. You learn a language by communicating, by reading literature in the field, having conversations with people. Okay, John Holt continues. In school you learn bad study skills. You learn bad social skills like bullying and teasing. School is basically a machine for putting winner labels on a few people and loser on the rest. And finally, what most people want their kids to learn is to shut up and do as they're told. So basically they say, well, if you can get to be the top 10% in your class, you'll have a chance to go be a doctor or some other, relatively highly paid profession, so to speak. A lot of it's just how willing you are to be conformist. Your IQ can go up about 30 points in terms of academic ability if you learn study skills. It's like the most valuable thing you could do. Believe me, I spent a long time studying all that stuff. It's worth doing. That's like one of the most valuable things you could do for your kid is teach him study skills. And you probably don't know them yourself unless you studied them, but you can get a book about it. You can read one of my books, or you can just get a neutral good book would be Super Memory, Super Student by Harry Lorraine. That's a great book. Okay. Next one. John Holt. We ask children to do for most of a day what few adults are able to do for even an hour. How many of us attending a lecture that doesn't interest us can keep our minds from wandering? Hardly any of us. And the schools are especially anti-male. God, do they hate boys. Okay. They drug the crap out of them with amphetamines for so-called attention deficit. It's not normal for a boy to sit in a desk 8 hours a day when they're a young kid. They're made to run around and listen to some stranger lady. Okay, John Holt continues. If you put a big fat collection of books in the center of the classroom and let the kids choose the books, the test scores will go up through the roof. Yeah, there was a lady who wrote a book about that called Donalyn Miller. She's the best sixth grade teacher in the whole USA. That's exactly what she did. She put a stack of books in the center of the room, a bunch of bookshelves on the walls, let the kids read whatever they want. In a typical classroom, children are forced to read 2 or 3 books as a class for the entire year. They hate it, and they often cheat on the book, don't even read it. On the other hand, when she had her kids just read independently whatever they want, they read an average of 42 books a year in a sixth grade classroom. That's because it was fun. When you choose the book yourself, you make predictions, you anticipate what you're going to find, you see if your predictions are correct. That's enjoyable. It's a pleasure. Whereas somebody says you must read this book and make a book report on it, that's an obligation. That's no fun. And usually the books are specifically chosen to be hostile to the child. Like read The Mockingbird, see what a racist you are. Okay, read Julius Caesar, see how stupid you are. No freshman in high school can understand Julius Caesar. Read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, see how miserable we can make you freshman year of high school. They do it deliberately to make the kids hate reading. Those are all bad books. Okay, well, Julius Caesar is good if you're older, but a kid can't read that. Okay, he says kids routinely gain 2 to 3 years of reading skills in 1 year when you let them choose the book. School is a place where children learn to be stupid. It's not that I feel that school is a good idea gone wrong, but it's a wrong idea from the word go. It's a nutty notion that we can have a place where nothing but learning happens, cut off from the rest of life and taught by a bunch of strangers. We can best help the child to learn by making the world more accessible to them, paying serious attention to what they do, answering their questions, and helping them explore the things they're most interested in. A little bit more like a Montessori type method, but homeschool's the best, and then private school's the next best after that. Religious schools can be very good. In my experience, they usually don't teach that much better than a public school, but socially they're 1,000 times better. I went to a Catholic school for 8th grade. There was no one having sex, not a single person. There was no fights. There was no drugs. Okay, the teachers were in charge. Okay, in the what do you call it, public schools, you're scared to walk down the hall. You're going to get enough. Somebody's going to jump you for your lunch money or something. Okay, people are going to offer you sex. I can tell you, I got phone calls to go to parties when I was in junior high at a public school. Oh, if you go to the parties, such and such a girl said she'll do this and she'll do this and she'll do this. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it at a private school. Okay, at a public school, at a private school, nothing. I made out I kissed one girl in 8th grade at a Catholic school. That's it. Okay, as a private school in 7th grade, I'd get a phone call. Oh, so and so will do this and this and this if you come to the party. I'm like, oh my God, I'm telling you, the public schools were insane in comparison to the Catholic schools. There's no comparison. Okay, let us continue with John Holt. He says, it is true now as it was then that no matter what the tests show, little of what is taught in school is learned, little of what is learned is remembered, and little of what is remembered is used. You don't remember stuff if you're forced to do it. That's an obligation. You resent it. You forget it immediately after the test. It's almost always nonsense too, lists of vocabulary words. John Holt continues, the things we learn, we remember, and use are the things we seek out and meet in our daily serious non-school parts of our lives. Yeah, like everybody remembers driver's ed because it's useful. Everybody remembers how to type because it's useful. Okay, John Holt continues, a person's freedom of learning is part of their freedom of thought. It's even more basic than their freedom of speech. If we take away from someone their right to decide what they will be curious about, we destroy their freedom of thought. We say, in effect, you must not think about what interests and concerns you, but you must instead be interested and concerned with what we tell you to be. Okay, yeah, that's coercion. Holt continues, we learn to use language well, spoken or written, only when we use it for a purpose, our purpose, to say something we think is important, to people we want to say it to, or to make something happen that we want to have happen. We learn to do something by doing it. There is no other way. The best way for a person to learn to do something is to start doing it. You want to learn how to play basketball? Play basketball. You want to learn how to play baseball? Play baseball. You want to learn how to play kickball? Play kickball. You want to learn how to swim? Go swim. Okay? pretty obvious. Like wrestling technique. We learn all these complex wrestling techniques, and you remember them because you need to know them so you can win. Okay, learning is not an activity that's separate from the rest of our life. People learn best when they're involved with doing real, valuable work, which requires skill and judgment. Okay, we're active learners. We're not passive learners that just absorb everything that comes at us. We actively seek out information we care about, and then we remember it because it's useful to us. Okay, learning is not an activity separate from the rest of life. People learn best when they're involved with doing real valuable work that requires skill and judgment, okay? The only difference between me and the average teacher was that because I hadn't had any education courses, I didn't know all the alibis that conventionally trained instructors use, excuses which imply that something is wrong with the student rather than the teacher's method. I thought, if you can imagine such a simple-minded idea that if my pupils weren't grasping their lessons, it was my responsibility to figure out a way to explain the subject so they would understand it. It is a teacher's fault. Homeschooling is not a threat. It's not going to overturn the school system. Most people are never going to try. Most people are so poor, they both have to work. Okay, and most women are brainwashed into thinking that working is something to be proud of. It's much better to be rich, okay? I can tell you, all these women, they're told from feminism that working is something to be proud of, having a career and that having a family and being a homemaker is for losers. But it's quite the opposite. Women who have the families, that's what makes them happy, okay? When I was growing up, my dad was wealthy, okay? And my mom never had to work. She didn't ever want to go back to work. She wanted to volunteer for jobs. Volunteer, she could do whatever she wanted. Minister of care, board of directors for an orphanage, tour guide at the Art Institute, at the Frank Lloyd Wright Home. She loved all that stuff, okay? Playing tennis at the tennis club. On the other hand, women who take the career route, they end up forgetting to have a baby often until they're in their mid-30s, and they often can only have one, if any. And then they also, are kind of burnt out on their job by the time they're 40, want to spend more time with their kid. They wish they'd gotten married younger when they were prettier and they could have attracted a better man. Okay, and I can also tell you, a lot of these women, they think that's where they're more needed at home, where they're the queen of the house, than they are at some workplace where they could easily be replaced. Okay, let's continue. Young people, for John Holt. Young people should have the right to control and direct their own learning. That is to decide what they want to learn and when, where, how much, how fast, and what help they will want for learning it. Compulsory schooling is among the most destructive of all inventions of man. I would say yes, it dumbs down the population very badly. And you waste all this time with math. You don't need much math, okay? I don't use anything I didn't know by third grade, okay? All those years of taking all this math, for what? Okay, John Holt. Education with its supporting system of compulsory and competitive schooling, all its carrots and sticks, its grades, diplomas, and credentials, now seems to me perhaps the most authoritarian and dangerous of all the social inventions of mankind. In its deepest foundation, it is part of the modern worldwide slave state, in which most people feel themselves to be nothing but so-called producers, consumers, spectators, and fans, driven more and more by greed, envy, and fear. Yeah, it's not the friend of the child. I always remember saying, why is this being done to me? Why is this being done to me? I hated school, and for good reason. Whereas I loved talking to my dad. I loved arguing about books. I loved, listening to classical music, Irish music with my dad. Okay, that was learning. That was valuable. I loved learning how to wrestle. Okay, I enjoy whenever I decided I was going to teach myself something, I enjoyed that. Okay, compulsory schooling, compulsory learning is a tyranny. It is a crime against the human mind and spirit. Let all those who can escape it, let all escape it who can, any way they can. Yeah, it's bad. And it's much worse now than it used to be. Back then, it was a waste of your time. Nowadays, they're going to castrate you. They're going to have some bizarre-looking individual, drag queen story hour, drug you with amphetamines. It's insane. Then they're going to get psychologists to try to make you say bad things about your family. It's a disaster to public schools. They're evil. They are fundamentally evil. And now these international organizations want to take them over more completely, to more fully make them part of this hand, the LE. Then comes FT hand. It's commie, okay? If I had to make a general rule for living and working with children, it might be this. Be wary of saying or doing anything to a child that you would not say or do to another adult whose good opinion and affection you valued. Yeah, respect them. They're little people, okay? They don't know much, but they want to learn, and, help them like as a scaffold on what they can handle, Okay, since we can't know what knowledge will be needed the most in the future, it is senseless to try to teach it in advance. Instead, we should try to turn out people who love learning so much and learn so well that they will be able to learn whatever needs to be learned. Yeah, I like the idea that grade school teacher Donalyn Miller, she putting all the books out, because if you like reading, you can teach yourself whatever problem comes along. I've done that all my life. Whenever I encounter a new problem that can be taught through books, I just go start reading the books. You know, sometimes you need to talk to a person, but lots of stuff you can teach through looking through books. You'd be amazed. Nowadays, too, you can watch videos. They're complementary to each other. Okay, any child who can spend an hour or two a day or more if he wants with adults he likes and who are interested in the world and like to talk about will on most days learn far more from those conversations than they would learn in a week of school. Yeah, from your parents. See which things interest them most and help them to go down that particular road. Yeah. Temporary interest can help a kid. Like, you know, if a kid's interested in basketball, let them play basketball, but also let them read books about the great basketball players. They'll improve their verbal skills while they're reading about basketball. What children need is not new and better curricula, but more access to the real world. If we continually try to force a child to do what he's afraid to do, he'll become more timid, and he'll use his brains and energies not to explore the unknown, but to find ways to get out of it. Fear inhibits learning. The school system increases fear. Parents should be free to find or make for themselves the kind of educational experience they want their children to have. Yeah, the parents should be more involved in controlling school. Okay, not the teachers, not the principals, not some centralized place that's teaching them, you know, this hand, okay? What is most important and valuable about the home as a base for children's growth into the world is not that it is better than schools, but that it isn't a school at all. Human beings are good at learning what they feel a need for. Whether they see a connection between the thing and the real life, then they're good. When they see a connection between real life and the thing they're learning, they're good at learning. Most teachers think they are supposed to be filling bottles, but teaching is not filling a bottle. It is more like gardening. You don't tape leaves onto a plant. Good teachers create the conditions under which the plant can grow. What children need is not new and better curriculum, but more access to the real world and to learn about things they care about. So anyways, those are the quotes of John Holt. I hope you found them helpful.